Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Welcome to VUX World with me, Kane Sims, and I'm delighted today to be joined by an old friend, Mac Bernstein, the CEO of Balto. I'm going to introduce Mark in just one second, but as you know by now, you should know by now, that Unparsed is coming. It's coming in 4 weeks' time. The day is drawing closer. 400 conversational AI designers and developers gathering in London at the Museum of London, not to look at the collection, not to be spectators, but to be involved in the AI event of the season, of the year, of the decade even. Last year, Unparsed sold out. Every single ticket gone. This year, we're on track to do exactly the same. The venue's bigger, the venue's better, the content's bigger and better. You are going to be absolutely amazed. We've got workshops, we've got hackathons, we've got awards, we've got so much insight from so many practitioners and experts that you will be blown away. VoiceFlow is the platinum sponsor. We've got all kinds of other partners involved as well. Core AI, we've got Raza, we've got Radiant, etc., etc. You need to be there. If you are interested in being there, if you haven't got your ticket yet, the prices have gone up. However, because you're an insider, you're on the VUX World crew, you're part of the circle, we have a promo code for you. Use the promo code VUX World, all capital letters, at checkout at unparsedconf.com, and you will bring that price sailing down back to the early bird price. And that works for online tickets, it works for in-person tickets. You can save yourself a small fortune and join us in June 17th to 19th. I look forward to seeing you there. Thank you so much. All right. Now then, let's get on with it. OpenAI have made some big changes, big updates this week, and to join me to speak about that, we have the one and only Mac Bernstein. Mark, welcome back to VUX World, my friend.
Hey, great to see you. Good to be here. Boy, is it an exciting time with everything that's going on in voice AI and AI in general. So I think we got a work cut out for us. Lots to talk about.
Definitely. So for those tuning in, we used to do these. I don't know how often we ended up managing to make it. We used to do it probably, I would say, maybe once a month, something like that.
Just about, yeah.
Yeah, just about. And the format for these was really good because rather than talking about platforms or talking about best practice and doing the stuff that we always do, these conversations are really interesting because they're a lot more topical, they're a lot more kind of broad ranging, very, very interesting. And so definitely looking forward to getting into this today because you're nostril deep into this kind of stuff, Mark, as am I. And it seems as though you can't open your phone these days without some updates going on. But this week is a particularly special one.
Yeah. It's really interesting. And one of the things I love about this format is I think sometimes people go to one of two sides of the spectrum of the conversation. Either they're very, very practical, they're very in the weeds, you can deploy this solution in this environment in this way with these features, or they're, will robots take over the world by 2048? And people kind of go like one side or the other. And I think it's really important to be able to find where is this going? What do the historical patterns seem to indicate is about to happen? What do a number of different scientists in the space say are about to happen? And can we prognosticate a little bit and then bring it down to what we're doing right now, where the world is at right now? When we see an update like GPT-4o, how should we all be thinking about, what that means for, what we're going to be seeing in the world over the next month, next year, and then next 5 years?
Yeah. And what for those that don't know, maybe we should start with the general updates that came out of OpenAI this week. And I don't know about you, it seemed to me, so Google I/O is probably happening right now. If not right now, then in like a couple of hours. And I don't know about what your thoughts are. And the cynic in me kind of looks at the OpenAI event and I'm thinking, well, there's about 50 people there. They had about 2 cameras. The presentation was very light on detail. It was very short. And so did they kind of throw this together for the sake of getting out in front of Google I/O or what? Like, that was our sort of, musings about it.
My thoughts when I saw their demo event is it almost felt like that was their intention, not to get in front of Google I/O. I do think there's, of course, a true race between all the AI players in the space. But I think OpenAI is trying to paint themselves as the people's AI, right? The fact that they're even doing the 4o release and they're including that for all their free users. There's no other AI that I think has the level of free capabilities that OpenAI offers. So I think they're trying to do this like kind of collegial fireside chat. Oh, it's just a small audience of 50 friends, because we all know that if someone said OpenAI, you have 24 hours to do an event, how many people can you get there? The answer is certainly north of 50.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah, without a doubt. So let's go over then. We'll go over some of the things that were announced. I'm just checking the stream because I thought I had a bit of an issue with the video there. I think we're all right. So things that were announced. So obviously there's a new model. There's a new GPT version. It's an update to GPT-4. It's GPT-4o. I don't know why they called it 4o. It's with my northern accent, sounds a bit 4o. Anyway, so it's essentially, it has enhanced vision, which is one thing, so that it can recognize not just still images, but it can also interpret video, which is very interesting. There was an update. They've now released a desktop application, so you can run it natively on your machine. It's got enhanced voice production, which it seems to be kind of understanding in real time, as opposed to what I believe Whisper does, which is it will recognize the audio, it will then kind of translate the audio to text, probably run it via a large language model to create a better version of that text to increase the accuracy, and then it passes it down the pipeline. It seems as though these updates are happening a lot faster and in real time. We'll get into a bit more details on that in a sec. I'll just go through the rest of the stuff. Better memory, which means that essentially you can stitch not just one single session together, but it recognizes and remembers over time, essentially. So previous things and previous conversations you've had days and weeks ago, it will also be able to remember those. It's got more advanced data analytics. So if you're using it to upload charts and various bits and bobs and ask it questions about that data, it's gotten a bit more better at that. Better language support, over 50 different languages, 97% of the spoken internet. Apparently it can speak. Barging, in terms of the voice assistant, it's got barging enabled as standard, which we'll see how that works in practice. But it's definitely an interesting feature that Alexa took ages to put together. And it's twice as fast. It's 50% cheaper, and it's got higher rate limits, which is, as they always do with these models. So we can maybe just go through each one of those things in more detail. But Mark, what are your thoughts generally on GPT-4o?
Yeah, I think my thoughts are that I didn't see anything that had not been hinted or released in some beta or prototype levels by other folks in the space. Remember, when Gemini was doing their first release, they showed Gemini solving physics problems and how it was reading the problems on the screen and solving the physics problems. And then you might remember that OpenAI demo with their actual robot that they had, where, and that blew up the internet, where it said, what do you see? And he said, I see a table and your hand on the table and an apple in a bowl on the table. I mean, you remember that? So
yeah.
that's my best impression of.
That was a good impression. You must have watched that video quite a bit.
Yes. So, we'd seen kind of little bits and pieces of these capabilities, and basically OpenAI is saying, we have it too. And, it did appear from their release that they've compressed this into a single model, which is super cool. And they, come out in the beginning saying that makes it really low latency. You're not doing, audio capture and then speech to text and then sentiment on top of it. It's, if I understand it correctly, a single model that's able to kind of deduce all of these things, which I think is really, really cool. I think that kind of the big thing that we could take away from this is OpenAI is trying to really put their mark on these, what you might call multimodal models. And I think what they're trying to say is the world has all of these different senses. You have voice, you have vision, you have, reading and, able to kind of pick up information and talk. And we need to put these all together in a single interface where an AI can be useful across those interfaces. And they're saying this is really the future. So I think that it was a really powerful example of what's possible there. I also think that some of the limitations were a little bit comical. Like when you were seeing their demo, think about the number of times where the presenters had to stop and correct the AI, or say, oh no, actually, nope, you're looking at the wrong thing. Look over here. Or where the AI would interrupt the presenters,
Mm.
And then, start a sentence and then realize it was interrupting and then kind of going a little long and then stop. And they kind of had this weird back and forth. So it showed that it's still not at the point where it's like really conversational, but the ability to kind of ingest data from all these different interfaces and do reasoning across these interfaces, that they really made a really strong push into that area. And I think that's going to open up a lot more possibilities that'll make way more impressive demos possible over the next year or so.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about that is that even though there was some things that didn't go quite right, it kind of got there in the end, which when I think back to sort of like the Alexa and Google Assistant demos and stuff like that, like those demos were all very much polished demos. Very rarely did it happen kind of in person on stage. It was most of the time it was a video that was pre-planned and pre-staged. I think at least they did a demo on stage, obviously live. And even though it was, the barging, as I mentioned when I was talking about the feature of barging can be a bit flaky, especially if you haven't designed things correctly where, it's handy if the thing's just droning on and you could just cut it off as they did a number of times yesterday. But also, there was that time where one of the guys the ChatGPT was kind of saying, from what I can see, it looks like it's just a table. And he goes, oh, no, actually, no, I'm not about that, I'm about this. Look again. But it did recover from it. And I think unlike assistants of previous kind of years, the blockage there would be, I'm sorry, I don't know that, start the whole interaction again. Whereas at least this was able to be more fluid. It was able to correct itself when it got it wrong and stuff like that. And I think I kind of respect the fact that they did what was quite clearly an actual live demo, which is good.
I love that. I love when folks are willing to kind of put their money where their mouth is and really show live demos. I think that's like a really takes a lot of courage in the tech space to do that. And I think it also creates a lot more transparency with the market, where people can start to look at demos and say, this is real. This is an actual reflection of what the experience is going to be like. I do think that if you think about all those little things put together, the interrupting, the droning on, the even how like it kind of, you would ask maybe like a little question or something, and it would give you a lot of pleasantries. Like, oh, wow, that's great. Thanks for asking me how I'm doing. I'm doing great. How are you doing? And if you think about putting all of those little, I'm going to say annoyances together, and then now you're actually using it in a product, those do get pretty freaking annoying when you put them together and really like pull away from the product experience. So I think what they were asking us to do in the demo is use your brains to just picture where this will be a year from now or 2 years from now, and imagine that everyone's gotten better at preventing interruptions, and everyone's gotten better about figuring out what the optimal length of response is, and they've gotten better figuring out how much pleasantries people really want versus how much they're trying to talk to an AI friend. So I think they're actually telling us, please, fill in the gaps with your imagination, and I think that's a very reasonable thing to do, because I think in a year or 2 years, we'll say, whoa, that is like really like natural conversation. But it also today did show me, man, the leading AI company in the world is trying to do natural real-time conversation, and they're not there yet.
Yeah.
So I thought that also kind of gave me a little bit of like humility for where this technology is really at.
Yeah, I see exactly what you're saying there. The challenge that OpenAI has from that specific point of view of trying to do natural conversation is that, I don't want to speak out of turn, I don't know this for sure, but I suspect that OpenAI has, obviously it does have a lot of engineers, it's very much a tech company, and you can tell from using ChatGPT that it's not necessarily refined in the art of conversation. It just does what you tell it to do. A bit like Alexa used to do when you say turn off the lights, it turns off the lights. Alexa could manage conversations a bit better, I suppose, because it had that kind of conversation design discipline, whereas ChatGPT doesn't seem to have it. Like, and every chatbot that uses ChatGPT doesn't have it either, and you can tell it a mile away, because one of the things that LLM-powered bots never do is they never take the conversation forward. You know, it'll be like, I tested the Vodafone one the other week, Voxy it's called, and I said something like, how do I go about upgrading my phone? And the thing it said to me was, what you need to do is pay off your contract, find a phone that you want, and then basically you can take out a new contract. And it was a full stop at the end of that sentence. Now, not in that situation, that sentence needs to end with a question mark, which is, are you interested in upgrading your phone? Have you found a phone that you like the look of? Do you know how much is left on your contract? Do you want me to take you through the process? You know, someone said that they're interested in upgrading their phone. Someone said they're interested in giving you money. And instead, what the model's done is it's used RAG to answer that request like a question, instead of understanding the deeper need behind it and then fashioning a conversation from it. And I say that because I think that's, in my experience of ChatGPT, is aligned to that, which is that it's not really a conversational partner. It's a task rabbit that will do what you tell it to do. And so I don't think they've got an experience design lens on it, which I think is the reason for some of those hiccups yesterday.
It's super interesting point. You know, it's funny because Sam Altman was on the All In podcast last week, and they were asking him, how do you think about these AIs? And he said, well, and I'm going to paraphrase, I don't think about these AIs as task rabbits, if you will, where they just do your bidding. He's like, I think about these AIs like one of your most capable like high level hires that you might have in a company. And what do you want that person to do? You want them to challenge you. You want them to clarify your request and say, hey, let me make sure I get some detail around it. Did you mean this or did you mean that? So it does sound like the vision very much, is to give it more of this, more reasoning, more kind of intellectual back and forth. And, of course, I think that's necessary when you're going to try to approximate human intelligence or surpass human intelligence, which is their stated goal. I do think it's interesting that, I also wondered when they released it, why are they calling it, GPT-4o? So I just quickly looked it up, and, O stands for Omni, right? And the idea is, Omni, all of the different data sources and modalities. So they're kind of putting their own kind of brand twist on, multimodal. But it's also funny that Omni kind of has a connotation of omniscient and omnipresent. And I'm like, that's a little bit of like a foreshadowing, right? Like think about if in 10 years from now, we look back and say, isn't it funny they named it Omni? This is the all-knowing, all everywhere AI. Because I think that's kind of what they're building toward. And we'll see when exactly that happens. But I think it's a little bit ironic that's the direction that it seems like they're trying to head in.
Yeah, well, their mission is to create artificial general intelligence, isn't it? And that kind of, I suppose, is omnipresent from the perspective of what they want to do is the same as Alexa everywhere strategy, which is put it absolutely everywhere, so that it wouldn't surprise me at all. I don't think they'll get into the hardware business, but it wouldn't surprise me at some point in future if there was a partnership with a hardware company that was running ChatGPT natively in other on other devices and all that kind of stuff, because they will need to making it available everywhere is definitely one of the things that it'll need to do. What's interesting is going back to that kind of like, it's a relation to the whole Omni sort of goal plus the experience design goal, is that you'll notice that in the demo they gave, the pleasantries that you were alluding to were present. Oh, hi. Oh, I'm great. Oh, how are you? But if you were to say that to the chatbot, the chat interface, you might not necessarily, or you shouldn't necessarily get the same response, because reading, "Oh, I'm fine," or "How are you?" and all of those kind of disfluencies isn't appropriate in text, because text should be rehearsed, it should be accurate. And also the use cases will change because, your voice, what you're not going to do is sit down and work on defining a job description just in the app using nothing but your voice. So the task that you're going to achieve with the model is going to be different depending on the modality. The voice assistant needs to be a lot more conversational, needs to be a lot more fluid, needs to have badging, all that kind of stuff. You're very rarely going to interrupt the model on text, so you don't necessarily need badging there. I know you can stop it, and I've done that a few times, but do you know what I'm saying? So the requirements of the interface are going to be different based on the channel because the requirements of the task are going to be different. And I wonder how much or to what extent the model caters for the difference in that channel-based kind of or interface-based behavior,
Yep. I think, my hot take here is that I thought that the actual voice experience of it was the least impressive part of the demo. And I've seen a number of tools that get kind of approximately close to what they were saying, where, it has the ability to respond and has some ability to reason. I thought it was cool how it can change its tonality and change its voice on the fly. So it definitely had some things I have not seen before that I thought were super cool. But I thought the actual, the real breakthrough that's going to change the world over the next year is how readily available they made this computer vision capability, the ability to see what's through a camera or be able to see what's on a screen. And the idea to be able to, prompt it with questions and reasoning about what do you see and what do you think should happen based on what is happening visually. And I can picture, in the technology world, folks are going to start chaining together prompts based on what's happening on a screen. So they're going to say, you can imagine in the contact center world, folks want to automate, the data entry on the rep screen. So you can imagine a chain of prompts where the first prompt says, identify all of the elements on this screen. And by the way, you'd have to in detail specify what counts as an element because it can't read your brain. Otherwise, it'll be like, it's blue, So identify all of the elements, and an element is defined as blank on the screen. And then, great, out of each of these elements, listen to what just happened in the conversation and choose the best response that matches with each element. So if you noticed a box that says phone number, then make sure that you tell me what the corresponding phone number is. So you'll ask it that, and then, you can populate that back into a database. And then voila, you were just able to, in this kind of crafty way, be able to take all the work that an agent might be doing on their screen and, automate the collection of that data and put it in a database. I think those are the sort of capabilities that are about to explode and be everywhere, where, a very savvy tech company says, tell me what's on the screen, break it down into some sort of features, different elements that you see on the screen. Great. Now do something with those elements, store them, save them, write to them, interpret them. I think we're going to see a lot of apps that are chaining together prompts like that, where it's recursive. It's not just like someone sitting there typing it in one at a time, but a programmer that has said, do all of these in sequence. So it goes from the start to the end of that process autonomously. And I think that we're going to see a bunch of those come on the scene the next year. And that's going to be like the big innovation from what we just saw.
Yeah, definitely. I think that use case in particular, if you can get data, I think the getting data from the conversation is fair enough. Understanding what's on the screen is fair enough. I think getting the data back into the program that you're using is the challenge. And if you have APIs to do that, it would be potentially more efficient to just give the model the access to the APIs and have it kind of run that way. But either way, I understand exactly what you're getting at. And I think that it opens up opportunities for use cases like, if you imagine, a telco, high volume query from a telco is going to be something like my router's playing up. Now, wouldn't it be great rather than just text or voice that says, try turning it off, try turning it back on, try doing this, try doing that. Imagine just being able to stream the video to the model and observe what someone's doing, and the model can say, actually, you pressed the wrong button there. That's what's going on. You need to press this button instead. Or you imagine someone who's broken down and a repair person turns up, opening the bonnet of the car, opens, I don't know what they, I don't know anything about cars to be totally honest, but like you can imagine a situation where you're underneath the bonnet of a car, you point the model at something and you're showing what you're doing, and it will understand what you're trying to do, diagnose what the issue might be, and then coach you through being able to do something differently. Do you know what I'm saying? Like giving it a vision is I mean, I'm sure there'll be use cases that we're not even scratching the surface of for this kind of stuff, but the potential is huge.
Well, what I love about what you just said, Kane, is you were pointing to self-service options, right? You were going all the way to the consumer level. So I was talking about kind of think about you're on the business level and it's able to read, by the way, anyone's screens. I chose a contact center agent, but it could read yours or mine and say, look at how I'm presenting and give me 3 tips to be more charismatic or likable, that's totally doable. But you went all the way to the end user and said, if you are walking down the street and you want to figure out how to accomplish something, you just pull out your camera and you start showing it and ask it, for help and advice and to be able to fix your car or whatever. I think that's super, super powerful. I have a feeling though that businesses are going to potentially be faster and like making that really valuable. And I guess what I mean by that is I think if you're on the business side, I think that there's dollars directly attached to you being able to basically do analysis on all the visuals that your business captures. And since, by the way, so much work is remote, now everything's kind of being captured on a screen. Like all these meetings are happening on screens. People don't have to walk around with their phones kind of, taking videos of the office. So I think that just the fact that business is being done on screens makes the ability for AI to capture what's happening on a screen and interpret it. If you have some sort of recursive prompting that occurs, I think extremely valuable. And just the fact it's directly tied to dollars, you may or may not be able to actually take a video of your car and it goes, oh, all you got to do is turn this knob and you go, oh, it's fixed. It'll probably say, all right, now you got to go out to AutoZone. You got to go get these things. Go buy this fluid and then you're going to have to, get this crank. And so that's, I think, the reality of how most things work on the consumer side right now. But when everything is contained to a screen and so much of the world is doing knowledge work, I think there's just some pretty low hanging fruit opportunities to like really be able to monetize, what's happening, digitally through screens right now.
Yeah, definitely. I think what's interesting is that this technology opens up the potential to automate things that were previously off kind of limits and things that you wouldn't even think about automating. I've mentioned this a couple of times, which is the use case we're looking at is taking this podcast audio, right? Just one MP3 or stream it. And then from that one MP3 file, generate the podcast transcript, diarized, broken down by timestamps, take that timestamp, create that into a YouTube description so the timestamps are listed so you can just skip to the right part in the video, create the web page description and the title, generate an image that accompanies the topics that we're talking about, turn it into a blog post, write the meta description, write the title, write a LinkedIn post to promote it, write a snippet for the newsletter to promote that, and pump all of that, pump the article into the CMS, push the newsletter stuff into the email software, and do all of that and more without lifting a finger. And so all of that stuff is that it's all manual pushing and pulling today, but that gives you the opportunity to look at a process that you previously wouldn't have looked at and think, well, actually, we can just automate the whole thing here. And I think you add vision on top of that, even just static vision that's accurate enough gives you a lot of opportunities. But being able to look at moving video, whether that's screens, whether it's recorded video, whether it's streamed video, it means that all of the other processes that you wouldn't have even identified as actually being processes become potentially able to be automated. So the potential that is it can't even be put into words, because I don't think we even fully understand.
I think that's pretty spot on. I think the way I've been conceptualizing it is we're about to be in a world where everybody is a manager. Everyone's a manager, and you manage a team of AIs. And even the example you gave, that AI is going to be working across multiple dimensions, writing copy. It's really practically one AI, but imagine it's five. One AI writes your copy. Another AI comes up with your targeting and your segmenting to be able to direct your marketing to the best people. Another AI helps optimize your ad campaigns. Another AI writes social posts, and another AI comes up with the designs for your presentation. And so I think that what's going to happen is people are going to be almost exclusively operating in this decision maker mode where the AIs are doing work and generating work for them. And they're really going back and forth with the AIs to hone it and make it look like and feel like and sound like and read like how they want it to appear. And I think that's really where we're going to be at. And I think that folks are going to need to continue to get really good at prompt engineering, because there will almost always, perhaps forever, be a gap between what you're actually thinking and what the AI thinks you're thinking. So you're going to need to express yourself just like you would verbally or would through writing. You need to express yourself really clearly to the AI so it's able to try to pick out what's in your head as close to as possible. Maybe one day it'll be able to figure out exactly what's in your head, but right now it can't. So I think people are going to need to get really good at prompt engineering to really communicate what you're thinking and how you want the work to look and feel to the AI. And I think they'll also need to get good at decision making and management and thinking about, how do I piece these things together? How do I decide to deploy my AIs on the most useful things? I think those are the skills that we're going to see be critical in the 2030s, if not the second half of the 2020s.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I would even add on to that process design, because as I mentioned, that process I was just outlining, which is what happens when the podcast gets recorded, what happens after, yes, it's a process. We've got checklists that make sure that everything gets done. But if you are going to streamline and automate that, you can make massive improvements to it. But you need to have that process design lens on it to, one, even understand that what you're doing is a process in the first place, and two, to try and automate that as effectively as possible. You need to be able to do, break it down into stages and steps and figure out how you can automate each of those steps and stuff like that. So it's prompt engineering plays a part of that, but the overall design of what the solutions should look like, I think, is a huge area as well.
Yeah, it's funny though, because it's also possible that the AI tells you the process.
Yeah.
And you're like, all right, so I want to create a marketing campaign. Tell me how I can stitch together these 5 AIs and how I can divide up the work in order to create a really effective marketing campaign. And put it in a list of steps. So it might even give you a list of 10 steps and you go, I don't like those steps. That seems a little more complicated. Could you try to simplify it to 5 steps? Or could each step have a few sub steps? Or you get the gist.
Yeah.
So, I almost think that, our ability to be able to receive information and evaluate it and judge how effective or ineffective, some sort of output is and be able to refine it. I think actually that's going to be a big part of what happens with human work is receive, evaluate, critique. And I think that there will be less of the initial kind of creation that comes from people, except for the highest level goal of, I think it's really important to drive traction with this type of customer. I
Mm.
think that level goal will tend to be people, and just the amount of time it would take to actually go through how do I do that. ChatGPT or whatever the next GPT is will be able to come up with 5 ways that are like validated across different businesses and industry experts that are probably going to be as good or better than the thing you came up with.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think there will be a room for creativity, but I think it'll tend to be at the highest level on the prioritization level.
Yeah, more strategic. I think when you're talking there about like this, the most valuable skills to learn is prompt engineering. Part of me also wonders whether that is even a short-term thing, because with memory enhancement, the thing will learn what you mean. It's already been proven that these models have theory of mind, which is that theory of mind is basically where, for those listening, where I don't necessarily have to say something, but you know what I'm talking about. If I said to you, Mark, what you're doing tomorrow night, you probably sense that there's an invitation coming because you know that you've got theory of mind. If I'm going to ask you what you're doing tomorrow night, it might be because I might invite you out to lunch or something like that. And so they did these studies in 2023 that found that GPT 3.5 has the theory of mind of an 8-year-old. GPT-3 had the theory of mind of a 5-year-old, and GPT-2 had the theory of mind of a 3-year-old. And they only just found that kind of well after the models were released. And so the models already have theory of mind. They already kind of have the ability to understand what it is that you're getting at when you say something. The latest release on GPT-4o has got enhanced memory, which means it's going to remember things across sessions. And I was even trying it this morning. I was doing some job descriptions this morning. The very first prompt I used was a definition of the business, definition of the objectives, definition of the roles I'm looking for. Literally all morning, I was just back and forth with ChatGPT, just trying loads of different stuff. I scrolled through all of the traction and all of the kind of activity, and it was just pages and pages, miles and miles long. And I looked at the prompts that I was using later on, and it was just literally just 2 words or 3. Do the same for a project manager, do the same for this. And it was just taking all of the previous context and doing everything that I was asking it to do without any further instruction. So, and that's just, that's learning from previous prompts in one session. But imagine over time, the more you use it, the more it understands you, the more it has theory of mind. So it kind of knows what you're insinuating based on your previous behavior. I wonder whether the whole thing about prompt engineering maybe a short-lived thing. Maybe not in the enterprise for designing solutions, because you're going to design a new solution. You're going to need to have somewhere to start from. But from a day-to-day person in a business using these tools, I wonder whether prompt engineering gets abstracted at some point in time.
I totally hear that. And I've heard that argument made a couple times, which is this is like the Band-Aid until AI gets so intuitive that there's no engineering component involved. I think that prompt engineering is here to stay, and very much for their foreseeable future. And the 2 reasons are, ultimately, I do think some human skill can help it close the gap from what is in your head to what it thinks is in your head. And you can even think about people who have like lifelong friends or siblings or parents or spouses, and they have a lot of data on your theory of mind and data on plenty of other people's theories of mind. They will develop kind of these complex relationships with over the course of a lifetime. And even they can't perfectly articulate what's in your head unless you are clear about it. So I do think that just simply people will get better at prompting the GPTs or these Gen AI interfaces with what they want. And you can even just imagine someone, person A might not really like to think through things. They might want a faster response. So person A might just try to use a lot of 3-word prompts and let the GPT guess. And the GPT will guess and kind of say, okay, I think this is what you meant. Should we proceed in this direction? And so person A is having a lot of back and forth because, like, I don't want to flesh this out. I don't even know what I mean yet. I'm just going to say 3 words and you can help me figure out the rest. Whereas person B might be thinking about, kind of a more complete picture that they want to solve and can prompt the GPT to solve that. And they go, aha, instead of having all these back and forths, I can answer it right away. So I do think just, there is just a inherent gap that will exist between what's in our brains and what the AI is able to understand. And by the way, our brains plus our bodies. I'm trying to remember what it is. There's some interesting research I read a quick article on about how our bodily experience is actually like part of our cognitive experience. Like, you know, the fact that we feel things and that we can feel our heart racing um, informs like what's going on a level that's an additional level to what we're cognitively thinking in our brains. So if your brain is like thinking a sentence, that's one level of information, but there's another level of information of how does your body feel that is informing overall what you mean, is
Yeah.
informing your experience.
Yeah, it's the whole kind of, there's a lot of research around the gut, isn't there? And how actually your gut is apparently like your second brain that
Yeah.
is responsible for certain not thoughts, but certain feelings. Like when you get that gut wrenching feeling, that's the thing that sends the message to your brain that something's not right. So yeah, it's definitely a kind of, it's about more than your brain. However, the interesting thing about large language models is that they're not just a large language model as they are when they're created. They're an increasingly large language model because ChatGPT is having potentially hundreds of millions of conversations every single day. And so every individual person, as much as they like to think that they're individual, they're not actually that individual in comparison to everyone else on the planet. There's going to be a lot of people who are very similar to each other, and ChatGPT is going to have a lot of very similar requests coming through. And even though our parents and family might have better theory of mind over us, what they don't have is the sheer vast access to huge amounts of data, increasing exponentially over time as more people use these tools. And I don't know whether, I certainly can't kind of extrapolate where these models are going to be in even 5 years' time. Not just the foundation models themselves, because they're getting trained on more data, but also the intelligence that's behind them, because it's now learning in real time about the interactions that it's having and how people are using it. I think that the potential for it's mind-boggling.
I guess the question is just how fast will that gap close between what people want the AI to do and what it returns, and how small can that gap get? Will there be a world where you can just stare at your camera for a second and it goes, got it, I think you want a grocery list. Like,
I don't think we're necessarily even that far away from that, to be honest. If you look at that Neuralink patient and what they're able to accomplish just with thought now, it sounds mad, but I don't think it's necessarily as far away as we might even think.
Very cool watching that person play chess, using his mind. And so I do think that we're going to see the gap close. And I guess the question is just how fast, and also, how small does it get where it really just can figure out what we mean. And by the way, I really do think an important part of that is like, really, we don't even know what we mean. But think about the number of times where like you just talk something out. I guess that's kind of what we're doing right now, right? Yeah. You're talking something out, and that's like you're forming your intention as you communicate it. So I don't know. I think that's part of it. And then I think another piece of it is the recursive nature of prompt engineering, where the ability to string together multiple prompts and say, go find this information and then do this thing with that information, then do this thing with that information, rather than having to do it one at a time, where you submit a thing and then say, great, now go with the next thing. There's a lot of use cases for saying, do all of these things in a big string back to back to back. And I think being able to think about how to do that and being able to, get the AI to do that effectively, I think will be an important skill.
Yeah.
So I think, and again, when the AI gets super smart, it can be like, oh, here's the answer to your question. Would you like me to go do these next 10 things? Which, I think we're not too far away from either. But I think for now, the ability to do those two things, close the gap between your mind and what it actually does for you, and then the ability to string together prompts to be able to accomplish a bigger job rather than go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. I think those are the two places that'll make prompt engineering a pretty critical skill over the next few years.
Yeah. definitely agreed. I know we're kind of close up on time. I would want to get your thoughts on the following. So, what happened with Alexa many moons ago was that people started building interesting stuff on Alexa, and then Amazon looked at what was being built and then started to essentially build its own first-party solutions for certain things. So hospitality was a big use case. You know, there was people who were creating Alexa skills specifically for hospitality, going out and working with hotels, putting devices in rooms, building skills that would allow guests to get done whatever they need to get done. And then at some point in time, Amazon comes up with its own hospitality solution. Same thing happened with care homes. There was a couple of companies that were doing things especially within care homes, and then Amazon comes out with a similar kind of solution. And so when you look at ChatGPT and you look at OpenAI, you look at certain things like products that were built on the APIs before ChatGPT was released. You know, the Grammarly's of the world and stuff like that, like writing assistants and things like that. The reality of the future of those types of businesses looks pretty scary, because as the models get better, as ChatGPT itself gets better, the thin layer that you build on top gets increasingly harder to defend because the model can do it itself. And I think that so far, the technology providers in the conversational AI and CX space have had a good degree of protection, I think, from the developments of these solutions because of the other solutions that they already cater for. They all, let's say in the conversational automation world, they all have integrations with lots of different NLU models. They've got really robust approaches to dialogue management and system integrations and all that kind of stuff. So you're able to then create very specific business applications. And the agent assist kind of agent facing situation, I don't think is necessarily too different, which is that you need to have some core technologies. You need to be able to understand the conversation. You need to be able to pair that with business logic and business processes so that you can do things like next best actions and stuff like that. Integrate into business systems so you can actually enact processes without swiveling through different systems and all that kind of stuff. Then you start to look at, and then also incorporated into that, you can have vision. There's lots of platforms that support vision recognition. You could text a WhatsApp picture and it'll extract the text from it and process it and stuff like that. And then when you see the OpenAI announcements yesterday, albeit it was a kind of a demo, and who knows what the real capabilities of it are. It's available now. I haven't actually tested everything that they displayed. I do have some suspicions that the memory actually is pretty good based on my experience this morning. But anyway, what seems to be happening is that the models are getting better, and the big providers like OpenAI are able to then kind of wrap other capabilities around it. So I could potentially see a world where, instead of having a conversational automation platform, you may have a private company-specific GPT that has the process that it needs to follow defined just in written form, probably produced with the assistance of AI itself. And all the model does is follow that process. It can understand language already inherently. It can understand text, voice already inherently. If you can give it access to your APIs and instruct it on which ones to use for which situation, it can kind of do that kind of stuff. So I just started thinking about, like, not necessarily this year, not in the next 4 years, but let's think a bit further beyond that. Where do you think companies like Balto, how are you thinking specifically about Balto, for example? Because I know there's lots and lots of other companies that do something very similar, not similar, but I mean, like the Cores and the Cognigies and the OneReaches of the world and the Observes of the world, and there's loads of platforms out there that are doing some really great stuff at providing very specific, business-specific, industry-specific, use case-specific solutions. When I look at those demos and I see the progress in the last sort of 2 years, I think, well, 10 years down the line, is it going to be possible to do absolutely everything, all just within, ChatGPT or an enterprise equivalent? I don't know how are you thinking about the kind of longer term impact of some of these innovations on Balto and on the market?
Yeah, I love the way that you kind of framed all that. That you might have, as a consumer, a GPT for each business you like to go to. So, and you hit up that GPT, or maybe you tag it, and that's how you get your support. So you're on one device, you're kind of in one interface, and you're like, oh, I need to, go return this thing, and you do at Macy's GPT, and then that launches a conversation where the Macy's GPT can help you out. Um, and I think that, of course, what that does is that's going to continue to push a lot to self-service. There's no way around it. As these AIs get better and better and better, the number of times you're going to want or need to talk to a human, that percentage will go down and down. So as AI can do more, it's just going to take a higher and higher percentage over time. So then I think that one of the questions that I then have is, think about when you're interacting with a GPT, um, or think about rather when you're interacting with a human agent at a company, like you get to be your own advocate. So you'll reach out to that human agent. And often the reason that you are reaching out to a human rather than just getting a quick answer online is because you have some sort of situation or story, and you want to make sure that you advocate for yourself, that the other person understands, and that you don't think that a bot would understand. You think you need a person to hear it so they can go, oh, I get what what you really need. Yeah, we can make this exception or that exception, or I can help you with this sort of case that to you feels unusual. So I think that's one of the things that you get when you're talking to a human agent is the ability to advocate for yourself. I do wonder if that's harder when you're talking to an AI agent that's perfectly versed in the company policies. Um, because let's imagine that you ask a question and it comes back, it's like, oh, here's exactly how we like to handle that. And of course, the company programmed their optimal response in there, right? They programmed, this is how in a perfect world we'd like to serve this customer. This is where we want to make a return, accept a return. This is where we don't want to accept a return. This is where we want to tell the customer, here, take everything you want. This is where we tell the customer, buzz off, and there's different ways the company is advocating for themselves, and they're able to, I think, do so optimally through this GPT. So I think then what it may be needed is the consumer might need their own GPT to advocate for themselves to the bot. In other words, I think actually the companies are going to have their GPTs that say, here's our company policies, our answers, here's what we're trying to do and how we like to serve our customers. I think consumers are going to have their own GPTs and say, hey, negotiate with the company to get me the best possible outcome that the company is willing to give. In the beginning, it may actually look like two bots that are chatting each other. But I think ultimately it'll end up being just like a back-end exchange of information where two AIs are almost negotiating and find some middle, optimal ground where both parties are willing to accept it. Because there are times that something that the consumer wants is not acceptable to companies, something the company wants is not acceptable to consumer, and you kind of sometimes have to work through it to find the answer. So I think that that's actually where it's going to head is, people are going to have their own GPTs that advocate for themselves in these scenarios. And that will be a good thing because it means that people aren't going to have to go through the stressful and often, almost, like it almost feels defeating at times when you're trying to like shout into the rooftops about the thing that's important to you, and you feel like you're not being heard and you feel to say it again. And I think it'll be good that people won't have to do that, and they can spend that energy elsewhere. But I do think it's going to a world where self-service is going to be the primary mode of communicating with companies, and that'll actually from that lead to a bunch of insights because what are you able to capture ultimately? You're able to capture the exchanges that are happening between these AIs, and that's the consumer stating their intentions, the company stating their reactions, and you're able to see how did these things work out in terms of ultimately helping the customer, the company. So I do think that the insights from that will live on and be really valuable to decision makers in these businesses.
Yeah, I mean, I can see a world where people have their own GPTs, definitely. I mean, the whole kind of personal AI story has been something that a lot of people have spoken about for a lot of time. I know Brian Romerly talks about this quite a lot, which is the belief that everyone's going to have their own personal AI, and that's going to be the thing that goes out into the world and acts on their behalf and stuff like that. What I was more kind of getting at was like, whether it's GPTs or otherwise, GPTs are essentially just kind of like a compartment of OpenAI's capabilities that has been trained on your specific thing, essentially, isn't it? So imagine if that let's use the GPT analogy, that Macy's returns bot. Imagine creating a GPT for the Macy's returns bot, but that GPT is not just accessible through ChatGPT, it's actually accessible via API from any channel. And so on the back end, what Macy's do is they describe their returns process, and they said, these are all our returns processes. These are all our APIs that we use to fulfill returns. These are all of our customer authentication methods, and this is what you need to do to authenticate. Just describes everything that they need to do to fulfill that process. Then deploy that via an API to any channel, including the call center, including WhatsApp, wherever. And that then uses the process as described, plus these new, and again, I'm not thinking about today, I'm thinking about in 5 years, 10 years time, however long it takes. The models will get better and better and better. By that point, likely there'll be sales specific capabilities in these models. One of the last times we spoke, we actually spoke about, I don't know if you remember, a Tony Robbins use case where he was talking about is it Tony Robbins? It is, isn't it? Is it Tony Robbins? Tony Robinson or Tony Robbins? Tony Robbins. Yeah, Tony Robbins. The kind of sales kind of coach fella. And he was talking about one of his first sales jobs where he was given this script and he goes to sell tapes and music to this couple, and the script basically is that no matter what objection comes, he handles it and he backs the customer into a corner and forces them basically to buy this music subscription. And the conversation we had, which I think you said it was probably one of the most existential problems of our time, which is preventing AIs from becoming so good at manipulating us that scripts can be written that will guarantee that every sales opportunity converts because the AI is so well versed in how to handle people. And so you imagine a world where the models get really, really better at handling people and handling people's objections and building relationships and all that kind of stuff. You can describe a business process using text and providing your API details and all that kind of stuff. And then you can deploy it via an API, one single API, because all of these models are now multimodal. It doesn't matter if it's a video call or an audio input or text input or images, whatever. It's all going to the same place. So, and again, it's not as simple as this. But my kind of theory is, I wonder how much the technology vendors of today are concerned about potentially OpenAI and similar providing the same capabilities that they do natively, and therefore it negates the need for that whole market.
Mm-hmm. I think in terms of, well, I think it's almost a, if you don't play along, you're going to get kicked out of the game. So if you're in technology and you're not saying, all right, how do I look at all of these models, OpenAI and Anthropic and Llama, and how do I look at all of these models and figure out bits and places where I can weave them into my application in order to achieve something better? I think that if you're not doing that, you're in trouble. End of story. So then I think the question is, where can you create pockets of value if you're a technology company, pockets of value for your customer that, OpenAI has an infinite number of things they can work on in the world where they're not going to do the thing you're trying to do right now because they're trying to go build, autonomous intelligent robots that, walk around and do all the things in daily life. So that's what they're trying to do. Where are they not going to tackle a certain amount of value that you're really confident you can provide your customer by taking the intelligence, because that's essentially what the API is giving you, or the GPT is giving you, is giving you some intelligence. It's giving you a data set or a whole bunch of examples that it's seen. It's giving you the ability to ingest new data and reason about it. And, if given some sort of reinforcement or correction, learn from that data. So you're basically leasing or buying intelligence. Can you, lease, OpenAI's intelligence and apply it to an area that they're not going to tackle right away, but creates substantial value for your customers? And I think that, I posted the other day on LinkedIn about how I think that AI is going to lead to a lot more differentiation in product, because I think people can now create a lot more capabilities because they're able to do so faster and easier. And I think that actually we're going to see bolder product visions, because you can try stuff out, and if it doesn't work, it's not like you wasted 6 months of dev cycles on it. You can have a couple dev cycles, deploy a new AI capability. It's big and bold, and you go, didn't really work, and kind of move on to the next thing. So I think that what it'll be is, these technology players are going to be stitching together very intricate and differentiated, platforms of value, if you will. And I think that when you look at this technology versus that technology, we're actually, because we're all able to create so much, I think we're going to drift further apart, rather than just like have this arms race where everybody copies each other. When you can only do a release every 6 months, when they have feature A and you don't have feature A, you say, oh, I want to copy it. But when they have feature A through Z, you're like, I'm not going to go copy 24 things. I got to build my own A through Z. So I think we're going to see actually more differentiation by weaving this intelligence, from these third-party LLM players into our applications. I think there's absolutely a room for, the kind of end technology player. It'll just, the shape that these technologies will take will be a lot different, and they'll have to make very savvy use of this kind of rented intelligence, if you will.
Very well put. Very well put. Couldn't have put it better myself. Nice one. Cool. Well, this has been great, Mark. It's been an absolute pleasure, as always. A very deep conversation. And hopefully that covers for people what's changed. And I think the back end of that conversation there, in terms of the impact on CX and on businesses and on people in general. So it's, really great conversation. Pleasure having you along, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Kane. I always love where this goes. We never know. And we always we end up at a spot where we're always like, whoa, how did we get there?
Yeah, so, that's true.
Real pleasure as always.
Likewise, yeah, likewise. And for those of you tuning in, you can check out Balto at balto.ai, balto.ai. If you want to learn more about that, we'll put Mark's LinkedIn in the show notes as well. I'm sure Mark wouldn't mind you contacting him if you're interested. And don't forget to go to unparsedconf.com. Get your tickets for Unparsed. It's coming in June 17th to 19th. Be there or be oblong. All right. Nice one. Pleasure. Speak soon. See you on the next one.